Okay, good morning, everyone. David Douglas here, affectionately known in some circles as Dr. D in this world and in the world that I'm in on campus. But I've always said, I never thought of this. I've always just said, I never want to be hung up on a title, right? So, yep, I am Dr. D, but you can call me David. That would be nice if you called me that. I've been called a lot of other things, so hopefully that's what it is. So I'm going to do my standard intro here, but I am super excited for today because I have my niece Angel Stempert with me today on the show. And you guys hear me say, if you follow me at all, that we're a family in recovery. I'm in long-term recovery. My wife's in long-term recovery. My son's in long-term recovery. And this beautiful woman, wait, is that the right way? Oh, there we go. Angel is a person in long-term recovery. So that's what we are doing today. We're going to interview my niece and learn about her and her amazing story. So so if this is your first time joining me on my page and for what I'm doing here, my passion and my work in my world is to help people find a path to recovery from substance use disorders. And I'm highly passionate about what works for them, the individual. I'm in conversations in the community I live in. I live in Ellensburg, Washington, Kittitas County. If you put your finger on the middle of the state in Washington, that's where we're at. We're a growing, I can talk, rural community. And one of the resources that we're lacking in our area is inpatient treatment recovery for people who need it. So we're having some pretty good talks with stakeholders in the community and moving in that direction. I also give lectures in the community. I have a contract with the Health Network, and I give lectures and education. I should say I'm an educator. That's what I do is educate people. I'm highly passionate about individuals educating themselves in this arena. So I give lectures to professionals in the community in this arena of substance use disorders, treatment, recognition, recovery, all of those good things. And me and Angel were just talking. She is working at Recovery High School in Portland. Is it in Portland, Angel?
It's in Lake Oswego, which is like 20 minutes from my house.
Nice. And so I also do some work locally. We don't have a recovery high school per se, but we have our alternative high school, and we have some good supports in there. And one of those is I go in and give lectures and education on life skills and pathways to recovery to kids in the community. I'm on our county's mental health and recovery board. And I live a fortunate life as a person in long-term recovery myself, having been, I'll show you here. That's right here, don't worry. Having been in some pretty dark places in my own life, that's my last booking photo in Pierce County in the mid-90s. I've been able to navigate from that dark space to where I am now, doing all of the things I'm talking to you. I also teach at Central Washington University. I say that's my day job. I love that work. So that's a little bit about me. And my goal for doing these interviews is to put a bright, shiny face on recovery. Here's the reality. And some people may not know this, you may know this, but we have over 25 million people in recovery in America alone, right? Worldwide, I don't know what the numbers are, but we tend to hear a lot about active addiction. We tend to hear about people who are living the life of active addiction with all that goes with it, right? The latest movie star or musician or athlete who is addicted to drugs and doing all these crazy things. And in fact, in our state, there was a documentary that was just released, and it's titled Fighting for the Soul of Seattle. And while I get the intent is to kind of put to light the negative issues that are in Seattle, I fully understand that. What it really did in many cases is just further the stigmatization of substance use disorders and mental health disorders. So my goal is to show the other side, show that people can do and will find a path to recovery. And when they do, they're integral, I always mess this word up, integral parts of their communities, which Angel is. You're going to hear about her, which I am, and many others are. So, and the other goal of this is to show all the different pathways to get to and stay in recovery. When this treatment recovery summer comes into fruition in our community that I'm going to design, it's going to be innovative. It's going to be different. There is no one way to get to and or stay in recovery. That's a myth and it has to die, right? So that's another goal of these. Number one, we're the bright, shiny face on recovery. Number two, show that there are many different pathways to get to and stay in recovery. So if you're hearing this and you're in recovery, I want to tell your story. It matters not to me how you got to and how you stay in recovery, right? I have my path and how I maintain my recovery, which I love and it works for me, and you have yours. So let's tell the world yours. Now, so I have with me Angel Stempert, my niece. Boy, I have a bunch of nieces and nephews. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give your little intro to tell the world about who you are. I have 4 siblings or 3. Sorry, I'm the youngest of 4. Got it? Does that make sense? And my brother, the oldest of the 4 of us, who will always be my hero in many ways. He has 4 daughters. I know if he's watching this, sorry, Bob, you never got the boy. And my first one and only one was a boy. But he has 4 amazing daughters, and Angel is the second oldest of those. And so, Angel, hello.
Hello. I'm awesome.
Good. So just give a brief or long intro. Tell the world who you are, where you live, kind of what I just did. Do that for yourself.
Yeah, I am Angel. Formerly known as Angel Emerson. I've been married for 3.5 years to a man who's also in recovery, but we didn't have any sparks fly until, we were both in recovery for a while. So that was something we didn't even know was going to happen. Like David said, I have 3 sisters, so 4 girls. I don't know it any other way. So to me, it was awesome having a bunch of sisters. Let's see. Yeah, I live in Portland now. I actually grew up in a really small town called Montesano, which is about a half hour west of Olympia. 100 people in my graduating class. Super small, but was born in Tacoma, and a big portion of my family is from the Tacoma area. And so that's where we go every year for holidays. And so, yeah, I came in to Portland in 2012 because I was seeking help. And this is where I've stayed. I felt that I needed to completely remove myself from a known area, too many triggers and too many temptations to go back. So everything has been going really well here in Portland. So my husband and I have decided to stay here, and I started school in 2015 to pursue a career in school counseling. So I mainly want to work with middle or high school students. Like David said too, I work at Harmony Academy, which is the only recovery in high school. I'm a recovery coach there. So hopefully after I get my degree, I could possibly be their school counselor. We'll see what doors open and if I stay in Portland. My ultimate goal is to work with kids in recovery, and maybe even in my future adults. But right now I'm led to work with kids, and I'm a firm believer in God and a follower of Jesus. So that's a huge part of my story that you'll get to hear a little bit later. And so I'm just really grateful to be a part of a family who, it's sad that we've all had a number of traumatic experiences that led to the reasons why we used drugs and alcohol in the first place. But to be able to be in a family where we can understand one another and relate to one another is really unique and special. I'm surrounded by families who their parents are still married and their kids can have drinks every once in a while and not have a problem with it. And that's just not mine or most of my family story at all. And so to be in a family where we can all just be with one another and understand one another is really amazing. And so I'm just really grateful to be here and to be asked to do this with my uncle. And I mean, I'm alive today to share my story, and that's why I'm here. I'm an open book, and I'm always open to sharing details because who knows who needs to hear those details, knowing that there's somebody out there who can get through these things and have hope and stay sober. So that's who I am. And that's me.
Yeah. I like to write key things down that I hear from people. And yeah, Angel, if my nieces and nephews are watching this, just relax. But me and Angel have always been pretty close. I'm close to all my nieces and nephews. I love all of you, but we've just always had kind of a unique bond along the way. If I think way back, I mean, I was, you were really young and your dad was living in University Place and I was just a teenager. I remember when you were young and you've just always had an awesome spirit and personality and to have, really coming all the way full circle. And we're going to share with you guys some of the key points along the way, but to be able to do this today with you, and I've watched your journey since you entered recovery, and it's you inspire me in many ways. And to hear today, I didn't know this, it was the first time because she just made this shift not too long ago, but that you're working with youth in a recovery high school setting. Whew, that's powerful stuff. And to know, and you and me, we walk different paths, right? Maintaining our recovery and you have never once, like guilted me or shamed me. It's like, why would you do that? And I would never do that to you. And we need more of that in this arena, allowing people to walk their walk, right? How that works for them. And I know that that's how you are with anyone you encounter, right? And it's a beautiful thing. In fact, I'll say this, one of my really good friends is Derek Allen, and he's a pastor at a church here in town. And he's also a person that's changed his relationship with drugs and alcohol. In fact, was he here when you came, when mom was in hospice? Did you get to meet Derek? I'm not sure if he came by or not.
I don't remember.
Yeah. But mom, when she went into hospice care, she wanted a pastor and Katrina's church. Derek was there, so I called him. And
I met the pastor. I met him.
Yeah. So me and him are close friends. Like we meet for coffee regularly. And what's funny is it makes kind of it a little bit attractive when people aren't pushing their agenda on you, right? So Tyler tells me, and he's helpful with me because I have my views and beliefs, of course, and biases and things I don't like about different pathways. And he's always helpful to remind me, Dad, you're sounding like you're saying that my way isn't the way that works. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's not what I want the message to be. So, but you talked about environment, making that move from T-Town. We're from Pierce County all over. Yeah. My dad's story and my story and all
of the 253.
Yeah. And I love Tacoma too. And I think, yes, it can be highly beneficial to make those environmental changes to support, especially early recovery, right? If you're doing the work like you were doing to take care of yourself, it can be good. I love hearing that you're following your passion and you're in school to gain an education, to be that you will, I'm not going to say it, you will be an amazing school counselor. It's going to happen.
Yes, it is.
And I'm excited for that. And we're going to talk about family because you said family multiple times in your intro, how important that is. You know this because you've gotten education that addiction is a family deal. It doesn't just affect me it doesn't just affect me when I'm in active use. And it also doesn't just affect me when I'm in recovery. And that's the great side of it. Trauma, we're seeing the research is clear now that for the vast majority of people who turn to drugs and alcohol, they have ACEs, adverse childhood experiences in some way, shape, or form. And being able and willing to address those kind of things as people in recovery, which I know you've done, is really important. But our stories have power, right? They have power to heal us and others. And I'm going to get to my first question for you and for others to hear. But what I think is really important for people to recognize, because we're going to share a little bit of Angel and even my own past, and I think I don't like that picture on the left. I don't live there. Is it on the left? Yes. I don't live in my past. I just don't. What I do is I've used my past as a way to help keep propelling me forward, which I know you're doing also to help youth, right? To help young people. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that great intro. And yeah, it's good. So here it is. We for those watching, I asked 2 questions, and then I go over 2 areas. I call one the wheel of recovery, and the other is circle of influence. So I'm going to ask Angel 2 questions, and then we're going to have some dialogue based on what we hear from the amazing Angel. What does recovery mean to you?
Oh, so when I saw this question, I just started writing down a bunch of things that it means to me. And so I'm just going to share those things with you now. They're super powerful for me, and it's things that I live by every single day. So recovery means that the answer is always going to be no to drugs and alcohol. When I was in my treatment center, I promised my older sister that I wouldn't leave until I knew that the answer was just always going to be no, plain and simple. I wouldn't have a drink on my birthday. I wouldn't make the excuse that it's New Year's. The answer is just always going to be no. Recovery means that I have made a commitment to my family to do what it takes to stay sober. And it also means asking for help. Yeah. It means getting right back up when I fall and trying again and again. It means going out of my way to help and encourage others. It means it is a way of life, and it is now a part of my identity. Using alcohol and drugs was such a huge part of my identity that I actually had to grieve. I had to grieve part of my identity, which was really hard because that was something I did every single day. And so now recovery has replaced that identity. Yeah. It means I am no longer an addict or alcoholic, and that I can claim righteousness. It means connection rather than addiction. It means I'm going to accept the bad days and know that they will pass. Because before it was like, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to go get drunk. Yeah. Just forget about it. It means handling my emotions in a mature way, being self-aware. It means I no longer numb my feelings, but look at them as an opportunity for growth. It means I have decided to walk with Jesus in every way and find forgiveness for others as well as myself. It means being able to relate to others in recovery and make them a part of my family. It means I am unique and have a different perspective on life that gives me wisdom. It means loving everyone and anyone, no matter what walk of life they come from. It means being honest and not sugarcoating the really hard days. It means owning up to my faults and making amends with those I have wronged or who have wronged me. It means reconciliation, determination, motivation, consideration. It means forgiving someone over and over and over again, even when it's me. It means never giving up on myself or others. It means standing up in what I believe in and never denying that Jesus saved my life. It means reading my Bible and journaling every day. It means I can live a life full of hopes and dreams and actually achieve them. It means that I have the time to do all the things I have ever wanted to do. It means I can spend my hard-earned money on meaningful things rather than drugs or alcohol. It means I can spend my money on others and not expect anything in return. It means I am blessed to be a blessing. It means I can understand others who have gone through trauma and addiction. It means I can be a shoulder to cry on. It means I take the time to share my recovery with others. And it means loving the one in front of me, even when it's me in the mirror. So that's.
Yeah. Hey, I'm guessing you typed that out, yes?
Yeah.
Would you send that to me?
Yeah.
I'd love to just hang on to that, because there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there for me as your uncle, and you know, I tell others, and you just said it, to not deny our feelings. So, you know, I want to allow myself to feel, and it's really happiness, but knowing where you've come from to where you are today, and what you just listed out, Angel, is so comforting, so powerful. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, it means I'm still alive to be able to share my story with others and give them hope, you know?
Yes. Yes. I guess I'm going to ask you, hey, you guys ever have the thought of moving to Ellensburg?
No.
I opened a treatment center and I wanted you to work there. You know, just putting it out there.
Okay.
Tyler's not going to have much of a choice. That's a joke if he's watching this. He
Say
wants
yes, but I'm also not going to say no. So
yeah, no, you're good. So the very first thing you said, and I so love this, that the answer is always no.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is always no. And what I heard, and you can correct me if you believe that I'm off, because I preach this, I say this, that, you know, when I was in active use, like when it was heavy, for me, methamphetamines, crack cocaine, even alcohol, marijuana, I'll even throw cigarettes in there, but, you know, I'm going to just focus on the heavier drugs and substances. Mm-hmm. I gave up a lot of my power, right? I was pretty powerless. But the second that I gained information, the second that I gained education and access to resources, I have a choice. Is that what you're saying there, or is that something different?
No, I'm saying, yes, I have a choice.
Yeah.
It's just like even when we were in our addiction, even though our experiences shaped our choices, we still had a choice.
Okay.
And so now going through all those hard things and realizing that drugs and alcohol aren't for me, trying to make it super simple and making myself choose to say no. There's still the yes.
Yeah.
But I choose
right.
to always say no.
Every day. It's like, no, not today.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, good. And I, you know, I'm going to kind of go down the list and have some dialogue about these. The commitment to family, right? That's a really another powerful statement. I give a lecture. It was just yesterday to an all male treatment center, and I do it through Zoom. You know, I can't wait to go back in person, but you know, we're doing what we're doing. I do not believe, I want everyone to hear this if you're listening, that I strongly am against guilt and shame as a tool to get people to change. I'm completely against it. It doesn't work.
Not going to work.
No, thank you. Yet I also I said this to the guys. I say this in the lecture. If I can tap into your heart and help you to see that, you know, I say, how many of you have kids out there? How many of you have mom that's still in your life? They're watching you, right? And they want you in their life. They want you to commit, right, to changing and doing everything you need so you can turn this around and do what you've done. Mm-hmm. You know, because you are a strong member of our family, of your family. And when I say your family, the family members that you communicate on a daily basis. And that's so important, is that commitment. Asking for help. Oh, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when you've been on your own for so long. And even as a kid, feeling like you were the only one that you had for yourself.
Yeah.
I don't need anyone's help. Nobody's helping me. So why should I ask?
Yeah. But being, you know, and on a continual basis, for me, as a person in recovery, I've been in recovery, I'm going on 14 years. That continual commitment to being able to go, yeah, you know what? I can't do this alone. I need some help, and asking for it. Mm-hmm. So important. You said this one multiple times in different ways. And I see this across all pathways to recovery, whether it's through a religious organization, a religious belief, whether it's through a 12-step program, whether it's through a smart recovery program, whatever it is, helping others.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of life, isn't it? That giving back is so important. But I think in our arena, it's even more important. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think one of the reasons why I used in the first place is because there was nobody there for me. And that's such a key part of growing up, is having somebody concrete in your life that's there to tell you you're doing a good job, show you what your strengths are, make you feel needed and worthy and loved. And if you don't have that, it's something that's missing. And so I feel like I kind of grew into this character of, man, I didn't have that, and I know how important it is. If I could just be that for other people, maybe that side of me can be healed that I didn't get. If I can be there for other people and help others. And I know that even in learning in school and stuff, helping others is very good for people who especially are in recovery. When you're helping others, you're helping yourself too. You know, you find joy. Like me, I find joy in my life when I get to be there for other people.
Johan Hari, he's a journalist, but his work is in this arena, and he's traveled the world. He's has some really cool TED Talks. He says it really simply and beautifully, and it's what you're talking about and what I believe too. The opposite of addiction is connection. There's a lot of good research that's coming out now. We've talked about it a couple times, is that for many people who get into the world of addiction and drugs and alcohol and all that goes with it, if you look at it, it's the lack of connection, childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences. And so if we, right, the providers, the advocates, can help people find connections, boy, that's gold. And then I think it's almost a natural thing. I know it is for you. I mean, you were even, I used to stay at your apartment in Tacoma.
Yeah.
Right. You always come stay at my apartment. And we're going to talk a little bit about how when I first, my eyes were up, I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? Right. But you have always been someone who wanted to. But I think in recovery, because I've been given connection back, I want to give that to others.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I think that's the same for you. Mm-hmm. And it helps us. You know, if I'm having a tough day, I hear this, you know, you hear this all across the spectrum in all the different pathways to recovery that, hey, you know what, if you're having a rough day, go help someone else. And I do not think that's, if you're really struggling, you need to get help for that struggle. But if it's just a rough day, right, get out of your head, go help someone else. And then you can think more clearly, right, about your own. Yeah. Connection. Oh, thank you. You said it multiple times throughout, and I just wrote down that life is life. Right? You've been through, we're gonna go through struggles. And it goes back to the top where you said the answer is always no. Life is gonna happen. We're gonna have struggles, but we have to make a choice to realize that life is life. Tap into those resources that we've gained to help us, and the answer is always no. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. And forgiveness. Oh, yes. You said it both ways. Highly, highly relevant and important. Just because the timing is such as that I gave the lecture to the men at the treatment center yesterday. You know, your grandma Gail, my mom. Mm-hmm. Some of the toughest work that I did in my early years of my walk in recovery was forgiving my mom.
Yeah.
Because I blamed my mom for a lot of what had happened to my point, to that point in my life, right? And getting to the point of being able to write this letter to my mom and forgiving her was huge. Mm-hmm. And I like to say this, and I want to get your feedback on that topic of forgiveness and how it's worked for you in different ways. But I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And what I say to people that have suffered any kind of trauma like that is my abuser's to blame, right? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I've forgiven him for that. but I know that I've done the work and I've been able to move on, and it's
Yeah.
no longer holding me back, right? I've accepted that what happened happened and really forgiven myself in many ways. So I mean, forgiveness, when you hear that, what do you think about for yourself? And again, please, Angel, it's whatever you want to share or not to share. This is a sensitive topic, I know, for many.
No, I mean, I too am a victim of childhood abuse, and the way that I see forgiveness is even my abusers have a past.
Mm.
Most of my abusers have, probably all of them have in some form or another experienced trauma in their own lives that shaped their experiences too. I did things in my life that I never thought I would ever do. I hurt people, I hurt myself. And it's the same for these abusers that were in my life. So I'm able to forgive them because they made choices that, you know, were shaped by their experiences. And, you know, sometimes, I mean, that's really hard to do, but I think about their past and what they went through too. And so I just know that I have to forgive them because they've been through trauma too, and
Yeah.
they did things they never thought they would probably do either.
Yep. No, I'm with you, and I think about mom, Grandma Gail, mom. You know, it was through educating myself. Again, please, if you're watching this, tap into educating yourself, whatever it is for you, childhood trauma, because it was for me through learning about family systems. I'm looking at my library, but when I took a class on family systems, and that's actually my entire undergraduate and graduate work was all in family systems, I was able to recognize the why of why my mom behaved the way she did. It was like, oh my gosh, it made sense why, you know, we have this crazy environment where we just did whatever we wanted pretty much. And well, she worked 2 and 3 jobs. She was struggling with domestic violence issues of her own childhood trauma that was brought into her own parenting style. So I'm 100% with you. And I'm just going to be honest. It's causing me to think about Lynn Gilmore, my abuser. You know, yeah, probably he suffered from the same type of stuff when he was young.
Yeah, and you know, even before I was educated, like even before I went to college, I've been going to church my whole life. And one of the ways of Jesus is to forgive. He says, you know, how many times should I forgive this person? And he's like, 70 times 7, which just means you forgive over and over again, whether that's somebody else or yourself, because, you know, our memories are always going to be there. You know, it's we can forgive, but it's really hard to forget. And sometimes when those memories come up, like they're triggered by something, you start to get that feeling like, oh, that person. And then it's like, no, you've already forgiven them. So do it again. Just forgive and forgive and forgive. And so that's just something I've learned from early on, is to try to have insight and understanding to just keep on forgiving.
And I think we're in a world right now where that message needs to be told again and again and again, isn't it? Because I say when I get contacted usually by family members of someone who's, you know, been to treatment once or twice or 3 times. They're like, well, you know, it just didn't. I'm like, well, you keep trying. You don't give up. I say, don't give up hope. And I think it is kind of almost like that forgiveness thing. Just keep trying, keep giving help until you can't give help anymore, which is like, I don't think should ever stop. Yeah, good. So I want to make sure I covered. The identity. You said a couple things, and again, for those listening, I've learned with Angel and I, we're in line with this belief, and it's for me, it's part of the lowering the stigma. Also, is that I don't identify myself with the terms addict or alcoholic. And I heard you say, you know, you're no longer an addict or alcoholic. And I'm curious if you can expand on that a little bit more.
Oh, yes. I'm so grateful you asked me this question, because not dogging on AA, NA, or anything, I have a really hard time. I've sat through a couple meetings, and when people introduce themselves, they say, hi, my name is so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic. And I just have a really hard time just owning that in my identity, because in my faith, I have been forgiven. I have forgiven myself. I've forgiven others. I made bad decisions. And to keep that as part of my identity, it just doesn't seem right to me. And I think about, Jesus died on the cross so that, we could have life in heaven with him, and that our sins would be covered, and God would see us as righteous. And so if I claimed that I was still an alcoholic or addict, then, my faith tells me that I'm not believing in what Jesus did on the cross. And so I don't claim those things anymore. When it was happening, yes, that was who I was. That was part of my identity then, but it is no longer who I am now. So I choose not to claim that, because I have been made righteous in God's eyes. So that's where I stand with that.
Oh, that's good. And see, and it's interesting, and I hope people are watching this, and the recording will be posted, because our views on the whys are similar, but a little different, right? You're not claiming it because of your faith and what Jesus says about, that's your deal. And that's beautiful, right? That's what I say. That's great. Mine stems from is that the stigma that is attached to identifying myself by those terms. Because if I introduce myself in the general public or community as, if I start out with, my name's David and I'm an addict, people have some pretty negative preconceived notions about that.
Yeah, they already put you in this box, right?
Yes. And so I always lead with, and I educate others to lead with where you're at now. It's why I start with, in these interviews, what is your life like now? What's going on now? And there's a lot of movement, good positive movement in changing how we talk about, you've heard me multiple times, substance use disorders. I actually use the term addiction pretty sparingly. Chemical dependency is actually not even used anymore in any DSM manuals as far as diagnosing or anything like that. The titles for professionals working in this field have changed, and it's all about lowering stigma. Now, for those that are listening that are involved in 12-step programs, hey, listen, if I go to a meeting and I choose within the context of that meeting to identify myself as an addict or an alcoholic, I think that's fine. I don't think there's any problem with that. Part of the recovery advocacy movement is to lower stigma. So what I encourage people to do is consider, outside of those environments, to lead with the positive stuff going on in your life.
Can I guess what that's going to be?
Yes.
So I would say, hi, I'm Angel and I'm in long-term recovery. That's
a beautiful way. Yeah, because that tells someone, they're like, oh, what does that mean? And you would say, my name's Angel, I'm in long-term recovery, and I'm currently a recovery coach at a recovery high school. I'm working on my graduate degree, and these are my goals. Because of access to resources, meaning treatments, my faith, help, I haven't had to use drugs or alcohol since, for me, March 25th of 2007. That's how I want people to do it. Because what that does is it changes the narrative.
Right.
Puts different information in people's minds about what this arena is all about. In fact, I was in a meeting this week, and we had 5 people in the meeting, and I commended the people in the meeting because throughout the whole meeting, and it made me feel proud. It was kind of a selfish moment. They used all non-stigmatizing language, and I told them that. And Robin, who works with the Health Network, she's like, well, it's because of you, David. You taught us, right? So all cool. People in recovery to just consider this about lowering the stigma. So thank you for sharing that. So let's shift gears. And is there anything else you wanted to share based on what we talked about on what recovery means to you? Maybe because we're going to talk about how you found recovery, but on the positive side, on that side of what does recovery, and I shouldn't say positive or negative, it's just part of our story. But if you sent one message about what recovery means to you, and someone's out there listening, and you know I'm an open book, and I want you to be an open book and don't feel like you need to filter anything, what would you say to them about that overall meaning of what recovery means to you?
I would say that my overall message is recovery means a life full of hope.
Yeah, I like that. It sure does.
Because I think about when I was in my struggle and I was in pretty hard in my addiction and stuff, the one thing that kept me going is I would remember, you know what, Angel? You were a child once, you were carefree, you didn't care about drugs or alcohol. You can get to that again.
Yeah.
And that always gave me hope. Hope
Yeah.
is what gave me meaning in life, or just helped push me day to day. And so I would say recovery means a life full of hope.
Yeah, that was beautiful. No lie, I was in a pretty spry mood this morning, and I was dancing around our home.
That's awesome.
Music loud. Mornings, I say, Alexa,
yeah,
play music, you're fine. And Katrina kind of giggles at me, but that's I have so much hope in my life today as a person in recovery, and I'm with you 100%. Even in my darkest days, and I've had some pretty dark days, there was that part of me that remembered that little boy.
Yeah.
Or there was that part of me that remembered that kid in 7th grade before I really leaped off the edge into drug and alcohol usage, that had plans and dreams and desires. And so I like that message. So how did you find recovery?
So when you had asked me this question, you said, you can tell some of your stories. So I guess I could give a trigger warning.
Sure.
I'm not going to go into a ton of details, but I will share, just my story and what kind of experiences shaped my choices and, in the end, what led me into a life that I'm living right now. So, growing up into a home of a family that went to church every Sunday. And then, when I was 5 years old, my parents decided to get a divorce. My older sister actually has a different dad. So my older sister and I, we're close in age. She's only 2 years older, but she had a different dad. So there was kind of that maybe barrier between us. And then my little sisters are twins, and so they always had each other. And so when divorce happened, my best friend, my dad, was torn away from me. And that was confusing and painful, because at 5 years old, you're not going to really understand all of that. And so that's the first time I ever remember experiencing probably real pain and sorrow and loss. Not even just a couple years later, both of my parents got remarried. And, when my mom married my stepdad, he had 4 kids. And so sometimes there were 8 of us. But in the midst of all this, being 5, 6, 7, there was so much transition and not a lot of grounding. It was just kind of like being pulled in so many different directions and just feeling like I was dealing with it all on my own. And, when I was a young kid, when I started learning about drugs, I think in 5th or 6th grade, when the DARE program was really popular, I was like, oh, I'll never do any of that. No way. That's not anything that I would choose to do. And even in elementary school and stuff, I was always a little bit different. I didn't like a lot of the girls in my class because they were always just really mean to other people. So from a really young age, I just really loved loving on people and being nice to people and kind. That's just always been part of my character. And so I had a pretty huge social circle, but I only had like 1 or 2 really close friends, because even if you were mean to me, I was still going to be nice to you. And when I was about 12 years old, I got to choose whether or not I got to go live with my mom or my dad. And having to make that choice at 12, that's so mean, because it's like, oh gosh, I would love to go live with my dad, but I also don't want to leave my sisters and my mom and my friends. And so ultimately I decided to just stay where I was at, because it was just too hard. And I know my dad was probably disappointed, and the way my mind works, I dwell on those kinds of things. So I was probably thinking like, oh gosh, my dad probably is so sad. Or I just was always thinking maybe my dad was really sad all the time and it was really hard. And I even gave the dare speech in 6th grade. I was 12 years old and I gave the dare, like, I'm never going to use drugs. And not only a year later, when I hit 7th grade, did I start, being influenced by my peers and started smoking pot and drinking alcohol or whatever. And that was fun. And all the people that were associated with those things, like all the skaters and the grunge crowd, they were all really nice to me all the time. And so it was very appealing to hang out with them. And I was very influenced by that. And, even in all this, we still went to church, and in 7th grade started going to like church camp every summer, which was amazing. And so there was always a lot of inner turmoil of, wanting to be around my friends and do what they're doing, but also trying to do the right thing, be kind to people, not use drugs. But I felt like I was always living 2 lives, one where I was partying and hanging out with friends, and then the other one trying to go to church and make things right over and over again, and so that was really tough. And yeah, I mean, in school it came really easy for me, and so I got A's and B's. That's all my mom asked of us, and so that's what I did. And so partying and all of that was just something that I could do because my grades didn't show anything different. So my parents never questioned whether or not I was doing these things, so that made it really easy for me to sneak around. Plus, whenever I got in trouble, I was really kind and I never talked back to my parents because I knew what I did was wrong, And so, around my freshman, sophomore year, I, started experimenting with harder drugs and just really diving into like the psychedelics and all of that. And it wasn't shortly after, maybe during my sophomore year, that, I was with my dad one weekend and he had found out that my stepmom was cheating on him, and she had asked him for a divorce. And I happened to be there that weekend, and I got into the car and he was just weeping. And sorry, Dad, I'm sharing this story because it's a huge part of my story. And he was just seeing my dad in that state and just being so sad and just probably feeling like he failed another marriage, and just seeing that was really hard. And shortly after that, he was going through a lot of mental stuff and tried to kill himself. And I remember being at home and my mom saying, we got to go to Tacoma tomorrow to visit your dad in the hospital. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, he tried to do this thing. And I was just so confused. And I was probably the first time I felt like a little bit angry at both of my parents because it was just such a confusing situation. And I don't remember doing this, but my dad tells me that when I went to visit him at the hospital, I guess when I was with him alone, I looked at him and asked him if he even still loved me. Like, why would you leave me here all alone? And when you're like 15, 16 years old and these things are happening, and, even from when I was 5, there was just those feelings of being alone and not being wanted or needed, not because your parents made you feel that way on purpose, but just the situations where you felt alone a lot and felt neglected, and all of those things just really were building up. And this was just another thing that added on to those feelings. And so it wasn't shortly after that, like beginning of junior year, that I really started getting into the rave scene and fell in love with that whole crowd for a while. And, too, like even from like 6th, 7th grade, I always just had a boyfriend. I just always needed some kind of outside acceptance and love coming in. And so, the rave scene brought a lot of those kind of things to the surface. And it wasn't until the summer before my senior year, ever since 7th grade, went to church camp, got saved every year, rededicated my life to Jesus, and I was good for a few months after that. So I always had a few months of clean time, like the beginning of each school year, I feel like. But the summer before my senior year, I finally, that was it. My senior year, I was completely sober. I had met a boy who was in the church camp band, and we had been writing to one another. Oh, this was before like cell phones were really popular. So we wrote each other letters through the mail, and that was awesome. I stayed sober my senior year. It was the first time I ever felt like maybe I could, get married and have kids with somebody who loved Jesus too. And I stayed sober, and I was on fire. I was on fire for doing what was right and following the ways of Jesus my senior year. I even joined like the Christian club and did all these things, and just really thrived at school. I think I got like a 4.0 my senior year. And 3 days before my senior prom, the guy that I was seeing said that he couldn't come with me. He had said that he could in the beginning of the year, but then 3 days before, he couldn't go, and I went to my senior prom alone. And then shortly after that, I found out that he was messing around with some other girl from church camp, and I was just devastated. I saw myself finally leading a life following Jesus with this man, and my heart was torn. And I never got mad at God for that, but it definitely was a shift in my decision making where I just kind of fell away from my faith. And I don't blame God for that. I'm not mad at him. I made that choice. I let this boy kind of determine the way I made my choices at the time. And so shortly after, I was just really struggling the summer after my senior year. I got another boyfriend, moved in with him. His parents gave us painkillers, and I fell in love. I would say opiates were my first all out addiction, where I was, after a while, stealing from my boyfriend's parents, stealing their pills, stealing money from work. One thing that sticks out to me, there's that reconciliation piece of, recovery and making amends with people. And a couple houses away from where I grew up, there was this family, and you could tell it was probably a pretty abusive home. And there was two little girls that used to come to my work at the pizza place, and they used to help us fold boxes and everything. And, they were rambunctious and really young, probably like 8 or 10 years old. And I was in the middle of my addiction pretty bad, and I was stealing money from my boss. And I used to, I got in trouble one time. There was money missing from the till, and I blamed it on those two little girls. And, my addiction was stronger in that moment. But that's probably the one moment in my life where I'm not proud of that moment, because the police came, and those young girls already had a really rough life, and for them to get in trouble that way, I'm sure that didn't help their situation at home, and they were so young. And even just like 2 years ago, I was trying to find them because I've just always wanted to say I was sorry. But it's like impossible. I don't remember their last name or their names, and it was a small town, and some people remember that house and stuff, but there's just no way that I can like find them. So that's one of those forgiving pieces, even though it still hurts and I hurt those girls. It's kind of out of my control, and the one thing that helps me is that I pray for them. Like, I pray that their lives were turned around and they were blessed, or, someone was put in their paths to give them hope and a future. Oh, so that was not a proud moment of my my opiate addiction. And I eventually got kicked out of my boyfriend's parents' house because I was stealing pills from them, and my mom didn't know what to do with me, so she sent me to go live with my dad. And man, I grew up in a small town, so going from a small town of like 3,000 people to Tacoma, it was like
Wow.
culture shock for me. We didn't have a lot of diversity. We had a couple foreign exchange students, but the population at Montesano High School was white for sure. And so I had always been very fascinated with gang culture, and hip hop was a huge part of my life. It still is. It's just Christian hip hop now, you know? So being surrounded in that culture in the flesh had a huge impact on, you know, my life from there. And, you know, my dad allowed me to live with him. I just kind of withdrawed on this couch for a month. You know, that was going through that is one reason why too. I'm like, nope, I don't want to go through that again. So, I mean, there were several times in my addiction where I withdrawed for days. Sometimes it was just because I couldn't find anything, you know. So, but you know, it was the first time in my life too that I experienced anxiety. I've never been an anxious person when it comes to that kind of thing, and so that was really tough. And my dad was finally, after a little while, was like, all right, you got to get a job. And I ended up finding a job as a cocktail waitress in a bar in Lakewood, which if anyone's familiar with the Tacoma area, working in a bar in Lakewood is not the best scene to stay sober. You know, I ended up making friends very quickly with drug dealers and being very heavily into that scene. I just kind of got caught up and started using rave drugs again. And so, yeah, I started hanging out with this drug dealer, and I ended up kind of moving in with him, and I just kind of got to live there. And after a while, you know, he was wanting me to make money somehow, and he was trying to get me to prostitute and do all of that, and that just didn't sit well with me. And there was a moment when I ended up like stealing a bunch of ecstasy from this guy, and I disappeared for a couple of weeks. And I guess in those couple of weeks, this person was the kind of person who was associated with people that would kill other people. And so they had put a hit out on me to have me killed because I stole, like, I don't know, a lot. I won't go into details on that. And so I guess there was a hit out on me to have me killed. And I was at a person's house, and they saw my car and they had found me. They knocked on the door and they just busted in and started stealing everything. There was a bunch of marijuana grow equipment in there and everything. And so instead of killing me, they just kind of took that as my payment, made me go with them. And then, you know, just all these things turned into this person trying to get me to keep prostituting. And one of his baby's moms dropped me off at a gas station and said, hey, you know, this person says don't come back until you make some money. And I was like, what? And so I had called somebody else. They came and picked me up because I didn't know what to do. I'd never done that before. And so this person came and picked me up, and this is another drug dealer that was associated with the other guy, but they weren't super close friends. They just were acquaintances. And so I ended up staying with this other guy. And in the middle of all that too, I went missing for a whole year from my family before I, you know, before I went and lived with this other drug dealer. I went missing for a whole year. And that was around when I had taken all those pills. I went missing, and I didn't realize it had even been a year, you know. It just seemed like it was just a short amount of time. But my dad, my family, there were my friends from high school looking for me. And, you know, I have had to make amends with my family and my friends and say I was sorry. Like, it went by in a flash for me. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there was all of that. And I ended up living with this other drug dealer, and I stayed with him for almost 7 years. We fell in love. But shortly after I had got attached to this person, I found out that he had another girlfriend. And he even said that it wasn't another girlfriend, but I found out later that it was. And so for 6+ years, I was the other girl. I didn't know how to get out. All I know is this person knew exactly what to say and what to do to reel me back in. And in the first year of us being together, I still didn't have a job, and I ultimately ended up prostituting and doing things that I, as a little girl, said that I would never do, and sold my body for money. And there was even a moment where this person that I was living with knew this other prostitute crackhead who had an acquaintance of this guy who liked teenagers. And she told me that I could pass off as a 16-year-old and get money from this guy. And I did. And drugs made all of this tolerable. Like, I posed as a 16-year-old to get money from this guy. And even when I think about this today, like, it's only been in this last year that this memory has come up to the surface. It's only been in the last 6 months that I've really been sharing this part of my story, because every other time I've shared my story, that wasn't a part of it, because it wasn't at the surface. And working with teenagers at this Harmony Recovery High School, it's something that came to the surface, and I was like, wow, I need to tell this story, because there's people out there who pay for money for sex with teenagers who are dangerous. And I lived that, and I'm still alive. And so after that had happened, I kind of looked at my decisions that I was making and my choices, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is crazy. I should be dead. Like, so 20 times over. I knew that there were people praying for me, and God was looking out for me, because if it weren't for those things, I know that I would be dead right now. And, I was with that other guy for almost 7 years or whatever. And I finally came to the realization that things were never going to change. He had said something that, like something about having kids, and there was a turning point where everything he did was annoying, and I just didn't want to be around him. And I thought, yes, this is it. I'm going to get my life back together and get rid of this man in this life. And so I ended up breaking up with him. But I hate confrontation and conflict. And so this person didn't even know that these things were going through my mind. He didn't know that I was struggling behind the scenes, because I didn't know how to share my feelings. Because from a young age, I just dealt with all those things on my own. And I would totally just stay miserable so that other people could be happy. And so when I finally was like, see you later, he was angry. He didn't understand, because I'd never shared any kind of struggle with him, or any kind of inclination that I was thinking about leaving. And, I still ended up, we were drug dealers together too. So, working in a bunch of different bars in Tacoma, I was able to do that. And, even after I broke up with him, I was still, selling drugs. And not long after that, I'd gotten another boyfriend who, I got another boyfriend. I let this person live with me 3 days after he moved in with me. He had lost his job. So then I let him start selling my drugs that we had. And ultimately we started, smoking crack and doing all these things. And I ended up losing my job, my car, my apartment, all within like 5 months of being with this person. So even though I had gotten rid of that guy for 6.5 years and thought I was going to change my life, here I go to another boyfriend, and ultimately start losing everything. Had to go live with my dad again. At this point, I had made a lot of friends who wanted to hang out with me. But because I had a boyfriend at the time, I just was always with that person. And so when I let this other boyfriend go, it was like I had all these people I could hang out with. And the last boyfriend I had, he was really cool at the beginning, but he was one of those people who would just lie and lie and lie to make himself look cool or whatever. And it's just, even in the middle of all that and like doing all these drugs with him, I was just like, this is not going to last. What am I doing? And I remember when my dad met him for the first time, he's like, I hope this is your rebound, And so, ultimately this guy, he physically hurt me and abused me, and he raped me, and he emotionally just drained every last thing that I had in me. And, you know, I eventually got rid of him too before I went and lived with my dad again. But, you know, out of all the experiences I had, that last person that I was with caused a lot of hurt and just pain of abuse that I hadn't experienced before like that. And I remember living with my dad, and, you know, I was still partying and hanging out with people. My body was completely shutting down. I had bruises all over my body for no reason. I was scrounging change just so I could go buy alcohol so that I could stop shaking. I mean, I couldn't even eat Cheerios because my hand was shaking so bad. All the Cheerios would fall off of my spoon. And I remember laying on my dad's couch one morning and just feeling the loneliest I've ever felt in my entire life. I felt sick. I felt drained. I just was feeling really awful. And I remember, you know, yelling at God, not because I was angry at him, but yelling at him, telling him, God, if you don't do something now, I'm going to die because I cannot stop. And it was like in that moment, I felt a sense of peace. And shortly after that, my older sister called and said, hey, you should come down to Portland. Your nephews want to see you. We really want to see you. I'll pay for your train ticket to come down. And my sister knew that I had struggled with addiction and stuff, and she'd always been praying for me, my older sister, and my mom, my whole family. But my sister always pursued me in my mess and was like, are you going to church and all these things? And, you know, even when I was in my mess in Tacoma, I would go to church and I would be getting high in the bathroom and then going and being with Christians, you know? So it was like, ever since I was a kid too, there's just this inner struggle of addiction and, you know, Christianity, and knowing that I shouldn't be doing this, and just really loving Christianity and like following Jesus and stuff. But like, I was being pulled in so many different directions my whole life. I didn't know how to stay grounded. And so when I had received that call from my sister, like, hey, come down to Portland, I was like, this is it. I'm getting out of here. I don't have a place. I mean, I was living with my dad. I was like, I don't have a car. I don't have an apartment. I don't have a job. My cell phone's about to be shut off in 3 days because I can't pay the bill. And I just knew that that was answered prayer. God intervened, and my sister called, and I came to Portland with nothing but a bottle of vodka and a jacket in my backpack on the train. And I got here and just wept, you know, and I just said everything out loud. And my sister and brother-in-law had been involved with this church called Bread and Wine. And there was this guy named Austin Tanner who was affiliated with Northwest Bible Training Center, which is an 8-month faith-based treatment center. And it was completely free. They run strictly on donations, and 8 months long. There were other programs that we looked at online that were anywhere from like 90 days to 3 years. And I thought 90 days is not going to do me good. And 3 years just felt too long. And I really felt like this 8-month place was it. And so the coolest part about coming to Portland after, like, you know, screaming at God to help me, that first night that I slept at my sister's house, I slept and I woke up with no shakes, no sickness. And I really believe that God healed me of my withdrawals because I finally said yes to him and no to that life I was living. And I truly believe that's, you know, he healed me because I finally said, help me, God, you know? And I came down here, and 2 days later, I was at this treatment center, and I just remember feeling so full of joy. This place, you know, there's a lot of Bible classes, and we have reading and counseling sessions, and, you know, we do music and worship every morning and every night. So I was totally able to be immersed in the environment that I've just yearned for. You know, church camp was like my my ultimate, just church camp was some of the most amazing experiences of my life. And so I always knew that I wanted to live for God. And so being in a place that was all about recovery and getting your relationship back with God and just learning the ways of Jesus and helping other people was where I knew that I needed to be. And when I was 18, I wanted to go on a missions trip to Mexico. And that didn't happen because of, what I was talking about earlier, what happened with that church boy that I thought I was going to marry. And so I just stopped going to youth group and didn't get to go on this missions trip. And so when I graduated from the Northwest Bible Training Center, I was like, I'm going to go on a missions trip. And the cool thing about this center was, it's 8 months long, but then you can stay on for staff because all the staff has actually been through the program. And so I ended up staying an extra 11 months and got to help people the way that I was helped. So I was at this place living for 19 months. And so when I left, I got a job I actually got 2 jobs, and I ended up going to Costa Rica for 2 months and got to volunteer at YWAM, which is a discipleship training school. You can find them all over the world. And got to finally go on that missions trip that I wanted to go when I was 18. And then when I had left the center, I moved like a block away. And people that aren't in the program can actually go for like church service and devotions. And so that was something that I did every other day, because when I came to Portland, that was my first home. I was there 19 months, so I just wanted to be there. And so that was part of my family, my community, people, who have gone through the same things that I went through are at this place. And so even when I would lay in my bedroom, I can hear them, doing praise and worship and stuff. And so it was just always there. And I still go there, and so, when I left the place, I still had my community and my recovery people that I saw 3, 4, 5 times a week sometimes. And even the director said, hey, if you want to come and help counsel people or come to dinner, we're still here. And when I was I was there for 19 months. When I was in my 17th month, Trevor, my husband, started calling to get into the program. And I was actually the one that answered the phone, did his intake forms and application, prayed with him, talked to him about his story and everything. And he had called 6 or 7 other places, and he decided to come to Portland because I was the most friendliest.
Nice. Not surprising.
Yeah. And, when I met him for the first time, I was the overseer, so I was in charge of everything. And so I knew that I could never be a stumbling block or have feelings for anybody. So when I first met him, there weren't sparks flying. I didn't think this was going to be my future husband. We just became really good friends in recovery. And it wasn't after a few years that, there's something that clicked, that we started hanging out in other ways. And so, we met, we decided to become boyfriend and girlfriend. And, I hear people say that it's not good to have a significant other in recovery too, but I feel like I love having somebody else in recovery in my house because they can understand me, I can understand them, we can love one another because of our faults, our failures, and our successes. We can always be there for each other. And when I had gone to YWAM in Costa Rica for my missions trip, I was sharing my story with one of the students. And the daughter of the director was listening. And she secretly asked her mom, hey, Mom, there's this girl, Angel. She has this story. I wonder if she'd be able to tell it at school. And so the director came up to me and was like, hey, we're thinking about doing a drug panel at my daughter's middle school. Would you be willing to share your testimony at this middle school? And I was like, yeah. And it was a Catholic middle school. So I was able to share Jesus all over the place about it because, I truly believe that Jesus is the one that saved my life. So being able to share my story in a whole nother country and just seeing these teenagers' faces light up and all the questions they had afterwards, I thought, I think I know what I want to do with my life. I got back in December of 2014 from this missions trip. I was enrolled in community college for winter term in January. And I've been going to school ever since, now that I'm in my second year school counseling, program because of that one experience in YWAM. I didn't even know that I was going to go back to school. I didn't know what I was doing with my life after I graduated from the treatment center. And so there was just all these things that brought me to school. And then last year, one of my professors was talking about this Harmony Academy and this recovery high school. And I thought, what? I didn't even know these places existed. I'm going to be involved someday. And now I'm there once a week. And, I think about all these experiences that I have with family, trauma, experiences, all these things now in school. When I got sober in 2012 and I went to that treatment center, I was able to get my relationship back with God. I was able to find a routine of, journaling and reading my Bible and a devotional every morning. Like you, Uncle David, I make my bed every day. That was something, they had a lot of rules and that was one of them, but it just made sense, having structure in my life, surrounding myself with other people in recovery, whether they love Jesus or they don't believe, it doesn't matter. Being around like-minded people who are, pursuing the same goal of staying sober, being able to encourage one another, pursuing, just a life full of hope together, has really been pinnacle moments in my life that progressed me to keep moving forward. Being involved with the Recovery High School, being involved with that Northwest Bible Training Center. My husband and I still go there once a month to do praise and worship and share our lives with them and encourage them and teach out of the Bible even. Being involved in all these things, is how I stay in recovery. And I found it by completely leaving Tacoma, coming to Portland, immersing myself in an atmosphere of loving Jesus and pursuing him wholeheartedly. That's what I wanted out of my life. So really pursuing the things that give me joy, the things that bring life to me, and continuing to make those structurally input into my everyday life. Whether I can get out of the house or not, I always make a point of at least getting a hold of one person to encourage them, to love them, to help them in any way. And that's just kind of how, I stay in recovery and find joy in life. If I'm not doing those things, I get really blah and down. And, I make sure that I get moving in the morning. I do a little exercise, or something. I'm just always trying to be involved somehow. And, coming to Portland and immersing myself in something that I knew that I was always supposed to do, and following the ways of Jesus is how I stay in recovery. And it's how I even found it, being around like-minded people in recovery too. It's a way of life now, right? Yeah, I mean, now my husband and I, we've been married 3.5 years, and we are in recovery together, and we support one another and we encourage one another, and we give each other space when we need space, we just have an understanding, and it's beautiful. So that's my very long-winded answer to that question.
It's powerful. I'm Angel's uncle, so if you've been listening to this and you didn't hear the beginning, I learned things today that I never knew. So as I was listening to that, I had my own uncle range of emotions, some anger toward the people that hurt you, some sadness for what you've walked through in the entirety of your life, and what I would describe as some of your really dark periods. Yeah. And what I wrote multiple times is ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
Yep.
The trauma that you've experienced along the way due to, you had structural changes in your childhood that you had no control over. And that was really hard for you, having that strong connection with the boyfriend who then, you learned was kind of living this different life and cheating on you. And that was a real turning point for you. And I noted this too, that you then found some connection through the skater world, and actually, and that our paths, I didn't even realize in my young year, are very similar. The loss for me of Johnny Ravel, when he died, I was 12 years old. I then shifted the crowd I was hanging with, and I actually found connection there. But we learned pretty quickly, right, that that connection was actually really, tainted with drug and alcohol use. You know, your dad, I know you know this, but I just, he loves you, all of you girls with all of his heart. And, our family, with him being my sibling and my own struggles, and I know that my struggles affected Tyler, and I know that your dad's struggles affected you. And it's not like, that's not what we planned, but they do. And, I remember when I was listening to your story, I remember it must have been, I think we recognized it was the Christmas before you found recovery. Your dad is, he'll always be my hero in many ways. He was my father figure. And I remember we were at Sherry's, your Aunt Sherry's, and I had stayed at your place a couple times. You had that apartment in Tacoma, a really cool little place, and I love Tacoma. And previous to this event that I'm going to describe, I had stayed there the last couple times, and I found some evidence of drug usage, and I was just like, I didn't know. I was like, oh my gosh. I remember talking to your dad, and the family. Now, we were having these conversations of how to help Angel, but we were at Sherry's, and Bob came up to me, and my brother, for those that you don't know him, he's a strong man, and he doesn't always show weakness, and he wants everything to be okay. But he came up to me, and it was one of the first times that I saw in his eyes some helplessness. He's like, hey, Angel's not answering her phone. Will you come with me? And I knew that you were pretty heavy into your addiction into the addiction at that time. And I was like, oh shit, let's go. And I'll never forget going down, and, you were in a secure building. So we had to wait someone to let us in, and we got in, and we banged on your door, and and you didn't answer, and you didn't answer. And then finally you answered. That was like that was emotional for me, but I know for your dad. And then it wasn't long after that you did the journey to Portland, and your sister, had heard of that place, and your journey, I'm starting to smile, has brought you to work today. And, there are a couple key things that I think are important to recognize with your trajectory to a life in recovery. Number one, the facility you went to was long-term, right? And it didn't cost you anything. You didn't have any barriers to get in. And we need so much more of that. You were there for, literally, in a lot of ways, you were there for almost 2 years. The treatment system we have in society today is, generally speaking, 21, 28 days and done. And we hope for the best. And this as well as anyone, we need long-term care, give people resources until they don't need them anymore. So it's so good that you were able to get those resources. Your story, Angel, now that I've heard all of it, is a powerful story. And you just sharing this story here in this very public forum, it's going to save someone's life.
And I will say too, like, even after all that's happened, I've forgiven my parents, and my dad is still my best friend in the whole wide world.
Your dad's a pretty awesome guy. He's kind of okay at golf, I think. I hope he heard that.
He's a unique individual, and I love every part about him.
And your mom too. I've always loved her.
Oh man, my mom, she's the greatest. She's just so much joy. You just look at her and you feel joy.
it's been a lot. It's been several years. So my wife, Katrina, was raised in Cosmopolis. So those that know Monty, they know Cosmopolis. And me and Katrina were in the area, and we were in the store in Montesano's.
Thriftway.
Yeah, Thriftway. And I hear this voice say, David, and it was your mom, and I hadn't seen her in years. It was so cool.
She told me about that.
Yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, no way. So let's go to the last two areas. And so we've probably got 10-ish minutes left. I like to say I don't like to put a time on these, so I'm not going to do that, even with this and moving forward. So what I want to talk about to kind of get toward the end of this is you've talked a lot about this in many different ways. And I'm passionate about individuals who find a path to recovery, about focusing on all different areas of our life, not just one. And I've heard that from you in a variety of different ways. Your faith is really what supports your recovery, right? That's your foundation.
Absolutely.
I mean, you would say that, I know, for your life, but for when talking about recovery, you've talked about, and so anyone here's the wheel, right? And this is not all inclusive: family, financial health, community, physical, mental health, career, vocation, and recovery support. You've talked about family throughout this, right? As being a basis of support for you before you entered a life in active addiction, during, really, but definitely afterwards. Rebecca helping you in big ways, your dad, your mom, all of the different key figures supporting you. Community, you've talked about community, how you're working with the Recovery High School and you want to help there. You're still involved with the Northwest Training Bible School.
Bible Training Center, yeah.
Yep, thank you. You're still involved there. Career, vocation, you're getting close to the end of your master's degree. You want to help youth in that arena. But just thinking about those areas, if you had to just, well, let's do this. Name two, and it doesn't have to be any of these. I could miss one in that wheel of recovery that you really think, not just for you, but for someone out there that's listening, what would you pull out as the two most important for someone to really make sure they're paying attention to? They're all important, but the two big ones.
So I feel like, for me personally, when my relationship with God is thriving, all those other things fall into place. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes down to it, it's like, I would say physical, mental health, mm-hmm. and community. Yeah. For the top two, just because, your community could be your recovery support, I could say those are almost the same thing. Sure. But yeah. For me, when my relationship with God is thriving, my physical, mental health is also there. And then who you surround yourself with is who you are. It's so hard because then I want to say, well, wait, family, there's family too.
Right. No, and I didn't prep her for this because my next area it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a beautiful segue. And so, yeah, I'm with you. And again, for those listening, you've heard Angel say, Jesus and Christianity is her foundation for her recovery. Mine is different. Mine is really my circle of influence, which is the next, and it's different. And I know Angel agrees with me. So if you're wanting a life in recovery, you find your foundation. You need some type of recovery support to be your foundation. Whether it's, there's an organization called Recovery Beyond. They started right here in Washington State, and they climb mountains. They run marathons. Exercise is really their foundation. You've heard of them. They do really cool stuff. Smart Recovery is an organization. It's a recovery support where they teach you, they call them science-based skills to teach with a lot of what we learn in different ways. But whatever it is for you, right, that's really important. And I'm with you. Physical and mental health, hugely important. People hear me talk about my morning routine. Like I go for a walk, I go for multiple walks a day. I do things that are specifically going to help my physical health, right? Exercise, paying attention to what I put in my body. I mean, this is water for the rest of the day. Something as simple as that, but just paying attention to those things is so important. So the last area is what I call your circle of influence, right? And listen, those people that I allow, right? We have a choice. Those people that I allow in my circle of influence, and I just listened to a podcast, and I believe it 100%, that the person and I forget the guy's name. It was a Joe Rogan Experience podcast. He had two.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, he does really good interviews. But the guy talked about, those 5 or 6 people that you talk to on the more regular basis, that's what you're going to move toward in your life. Whatever they're doing, thinking, how they behave, that's what you're really going to emulate in a lot of ways. So I really pay attention to that in my life. And I know you do. So I'm curious, maybe just talk about a couple of this is an opportunity to give shout outs to a couple of those key people in your circle of influence and why you have them as your people that influence your decision making and your thinking.
So number 1, Jesus. Yeah. Every morning when I'm struggling, when I'm by myself, Jesus. I spend most of my time with him. Number 2, my husband. Trevor, he's a voice of reason in my life. He's a peacemaker. He's a mediator. He's very slow to judge, if not judge at all, and just accept me for who I am and what I'm struggling with, and is a voice of reason. Number 3, my counselor that I see. I truly believe that having a therapist or a counselor, if you're in recovery, or even just a mentor or something, sponsor, that they're very, very monumental in, reasoning and just helping you guide through your thoughts. And then my sisters and my mom. I'd say I could just keep going, but number 1 is definitely Jesus. Number 2, my husband. And then I talk to my dad all the time too, but those are definitely number 1 and 2. So yeah, family.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Angel, this has been a powerful one, probably the most powerful interview I've done yet. And I am biased. It's my niece, but it's not. For young women out there that hear this either sooner or later or whenever, this could really help to shift their narrative. You sharing your story in the powerful way that you did is, if I use the word, a beautiful thing. Because look at you, I say it, look at you now. Look at all that you're doing now. And, I don't regret much of my past. I certainly wish I wouldn't have had to gone through the abuse and all that as your uncle. Oh my God. I am so, so sorry you have experienced the trauma that you have. It's just mind-boggling to listen to what you've experienced. And I wish that wouldn't have happened for you. So I hope you know that.
Thank you.
With that said, you said it. You're alive today. You're in recovery today. And you are sending a message of hope. You are going to save lives. You are going to.
Yes, I receive that.
You're gonna.
Making beauty from ashes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you. And if you're listening to this, I want to tell your story. I want to bring you on. So send me a message on Facebook or email me, and let's get your story out there. Angel, have a great rest of your day. I love you.
I love you too.